boast of having published in the journals of the Naval Defense University of Washington, D.C. and the Monterey Postgraduate Naval School, which I certainly can't boast of having ever done. She served as first secretary to the Embassy of Pakistan in Paris, as well as deputy permanent representative to UNESCO. In 1987, Raana became director of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, holding this post for 3 years, and director for the Americas. She then served as minister, economic minister, Consulate General of Pakistan in Dubai, and in 2001 became Consul General of Pakistan in Los Angeles, California. In 2003, she served as ambassador to Turkmenistan for 2.5 years before taking up a position with the National Defense Ministry. So she's here today to enlighten us as to the geopolitical situation in South Asia and the region, which is a very hot topic now. You may hope that moves for development in Afghanistan. So no further ado, I introduce Her Excellency Raana Rahim.
Thank you. I'm going to just give you an overall view because my focus is going to be on the regional dynamics and of course how Pakistan has its own opportunities and challenges in it. And basically when I go through this list of the trends, the global and regional environment, I would actually look forward to the question and answer session because I'm sure that there will be things that I will not go into details to explain, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions for me to clarify those points. So I'll just give you an overall basic picture and then we can go into the specific questions that you need to answer. We discussed the topic amongst us with your AUB administration, and we thought that it would be good to let you have Pakistan's perspective of what's happening in our region and what's happening in Pakistan. And I know that there's a lot of it on television and on the media and on everything, on the internet, everything that you've been watching. So you will be having some idea or at least some perceptions on the situation as it exists. But just to put it in perspective, Pakistan is located at the crossroads of 4 regions, that is South Asia, the Middle East, Central Asia, and China. These regions are currently the focus of world attention due to a number of factors. They also impact on regional security. And the peculiar dynamics of regional security is thus the combination of the geopolitical internal dynamics of South Asia and the impact of external factors due to its unique geostrategic location, which results in a significant impact from developments in neighboring regions such as Central Asia and the Middle East. Some of the salient factors of South Asian region I'd like to point out is the presence of 2 rival nuclear powers, India and Pakistan, having 3rd and 7th largest military forces of the world. 23% of the world population lives here. The emerging consumer market is of 1 billion plus. Proximity to sea lanes of communications of world's 27% of the oil. Neighborhood of China, which is a rising power. Defined Iran and its impact on the region, turbulent and unstable Afghanistan, energy trade routes from landlocked oil-rich Central Asian states, and U.S. military intervention in Iraq as well as U.S. policies in the Middle East. Now these all seem to impact on our region. Just to come down to the global environment, as you know that there are a number of factors which are influencing our global environment and can are presenting a lot of challenges to the international community. Global turbulence and effects of transition are being faced by Pakistan like no other country. And geostrategic and security environment in South Asia have evolved rapidly since the nuclearization of the region and the events of 9/11, mainly due to the interest of key global and regional players. Now, the drivers and shapers of the global environment basically, as we talk today, are the war on terror, which of course is being redefined or not being called the war on terror. Even the US has decided to drop the nomenclature of the global war on terror, but that really was a defining moment, 9/11, and that war on terror. And the country that apart from, of course, Afghanistan. Nuclear proliferation and weapons of mass destruction have also been a major driver and shaper of the global environment. Energy security has become almost a top political agenda, and energy security concerns have led to major powers asserting themselves and are fast evolving into major source of conflicts in the world. Economic security, the global financial crisis began with mortgage crisis leading to failure of large financial institutions in the US, which of course have impacted greatly on the entire world economy and naturally on Pakistan. Food security is extremely important. I think you all must be really very clearly aware of this, and we did have this highlighted in 2008 when the economic security came into question. And water security. Water really is something that it is foretold will be one of the defining or the major factors that will influence or that will be a driver in shaping the global environment, because there is going to be a scarcity. And of course, information and cyber technologies, because about 1.4 billion people are connected to the net and 3.3 billion mobile phones are active. And since this is a medium of a new civilization that has a range of human behavior from individual philanthropy to organized crime, grows on the internet and is having an impact on every facet of our lives. Now, the trends in global environment. The trends in global environment are important trends are regional alliances and groupings, non-state actors. There is a rise of non-state actors which exist in the form of terrorist groups. I think Al-Qaeda is probably in the vanguard of that, and as well as it is represented by other institutions such as Amnesty International or the IMF. Globalization, due to technological advancement, has led to increasing cultural, economic, and political interaction around the world, and it has transformed the lives of ordinary people, apart from the fact that it has brought about a lot of interdependence, which I don't think any of us can get away from or isolate ourselves as an international community. Population growth is going to have a major impact, and of course the demographic shifts can be very critical in the behavior of nation states. Climate change, I think you have heard a lot about it since the last summit took place in Copenhagen. And transnational crimes. Transnational organized crimes continues to grow in the absence of a comprehensive integrated global counter strategy. The world illicit trade is estimated to be over $1 trillion, with the global trade at $332 billion, human trafficking at $44 billion, and weapons trade at $10 billion. So that is going to be another major shaper of our environment. Coming down to the regional security environment, our region has been and remains tension-ridden due to a lot of unresolved historic conflicts rooted in political, religious, and ethnic divides. Some of the major elements which impinge on the security of Pakistan and the region as a whole are the presence of terrorists along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, non-resolution of the Kashmir issue, poverty and social deprivation amongst the billion-plus people of the region, the recent tensions and standoff between India and Pakistan, competing interests of rival global and regional powers, terrorism by non-state actors, insurgencies by armed groups, presence of extra-regional forces as part of this, what was termed as the war on terror, has introduced an element of uncertainty in the security capitals of the region. Transnational crime, which includes the funneling of money from narco trade to sustain violence and terrorism, is also one of the very major factors that we have to face. And there are multiple security threats: insurgency, terrorism, and transnational crimes. For insurgencies, we have, I think, the greatest amount of insurgencies in our region are in India, in its northeastern region, and they eventually prove to be very dangerous for destabilizing the Indian state. Isolated geographically, culturally, and politically from the Indian heartland, the 8 states, namely Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, and Tripura, have seen perfect storms of conditions of ethnic diversity. And the insurgencies there, coming also from economic deprivation, are really pressing on the political fabric of India. In Pakistan, border areas such as the Waziristan, Raana groups, you must have heard of that, groups have established various degrees of administrative control with the help of Al-Qaeda, and in Balochistan also there are elements of insurgency which are perpetuated by the Balochistan Liberation Army and support coming from outside of Pakistan for this destabilization. Sri Lanka seems to have more or less handled its LTT problem, but that was a major insurgency in that region. The Nepali Maoist movement and even Bhutan, which was used by Indian insurgent groups to destabilize Nepal and throughout the Nepali population, comes in the same state. Terrorist attacks, as you know, extremist groups have affected all countries of South Asia in varying degrees and has now transcended beyond local borders, as many of these groups are now connected to each other and operate as non-state actors. And then you have the conflation of terrorism and insurgency, and I think we are sometimes in the habit of, because of the common geographical and political terrain, we tend to merge the two. And one of the most clear examples of it is not being able to distinguish between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And I'll leave it at that, and if anybody wants further clarification, we can go into the question and answer session. And transnational crimes are committed by professional cartels, usually with no primary political or religious motive. These cartels engage in activities such as extortion, irregular financial transactions, trafficking in drugs, weapons, and humans. And this is one of the biggest problems that we are facing in our part of the world. Let me tell you, there is a writer, Ahmed Rashid, I don't know whether any of you have read him. He's written a lot on Afghanistan, and I like this symbolism that he's drawn. He says Afghanistan is like the heart of this region, and the heart is malfunctioning and it is throwing bad blood into the entire geopolitical body of this region. And that's exactly what is happening, because the drugs that are being produced in Afghanistan are proliferating in all countries. You hear more about them in Pakistan because we have an open system and we are more accessible and we are more interconnected with the international world. But they equally affect Iran, that doesn't talk very much about it, and they affect Central Asia in a very, very damaging manner. You might have noticed, Mr. Galloway told you I was ambassador in Turkmenistan. 50% of the male population almost are heroin addicts in Turkmenistan and in most of Central Asia. That is the level, 50%. Although if you go to Turkmenistan and you ask the rulers, they say there's not a single heroin addict there, but the UN figures are that it is almost up to that high level. And with that comes, of course, the trafficking, and with the trafficking there comes the human trafficking and also the funding of terrorist groups, which then have an interconnected link. So this is very, very damaging. The production of drugs is very damaging. The production of drugs, incidentally, grew tremendously soon after the Taliban went out of Afghanistan. At one point, it was only 90 tons in a year, with 50 going from the Northern Alliance areas, not under the Taliban rule, and 40 tons under the Taliban rule. In 2007, the UNDP figures were 8,200 tons. And when the figures came down, it is mostly due to drought and weather conditions. Of course, some kind of control is not being exercised. And that whole linkage to this, to the traffickers, to the terrorists, to the human traffickers, that presents a major, major challenge to all the countries neighboring Afghanistan and other countries in the region. And of course, that happens with the proliferation of weapons, narcotics, and human trafficking. I've already gone into that for you in detail. And now we have the regional dynamics. And how are we interacting as a region? Pakistan-India relations have now reached the lowest ebb since the start of the composite dialogue process between the two countries, and the recent Mumbai attacks again exposed the trust deficit between the two countries. India carried out a media campaign and media trial of Pakistan, and now we had 1 week ago the Interior Minister who admitted that yes, one of the handlers of those terrorists was an Indian. So you have to wait, and especially when Pakistan was willing to go all the way to cooperate, you have to give Pakistan to go ahead with that cooperation. Unfortunately, India didn't do that. Pakistan's basic position is that the only thing that will work is dialogue. And since India broke off the composite dialogue after the Mumbai attacks, we have been pressurizing and we have been trying to logic with India that we need to resume the dialogue because dialogue is the only way out of this whole issue. As I speak, I must tell you, yes, of course, that in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, our two prime ministers met and they agreed to restart the dialogue. And they also agreed that terrorism was something that both countries were facing and were waiting for. And to go into a blame game will be a self-defeating exercise. As I speak now, our Foreign Secretary has probably just landed in Delhi for the first round of talks that are taking place since the Mumbai attacks. He left. When I left, he was on television giving his departure statement, so he must be in Delhi by now. So that's where we are with India. We have tried confidence-building measures. We think dialogue is the best way forward. We want the Indians to acknowledge that Kashmir is an issue which needs to be talked about and resolved. And the moment Indians come on board, that will be very good for our region. And in fact, the SAARC region suffers from the fact that the largest member of SAARC, who does not allow any political issues to be discussed in the SAARC Charter, has political disputes with all its core neighbors, that is India. Dispute with Pakistan, with Nepal, with Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka, and even to some extent with Maldives, and of course with Bhutan. So it is somewhat of a dysfunctional region. Now we come to really the very important element of Afghanistan. Afghanistan presents a distinct challenge to the international community. Security, political stability, and economic development in Afghanistan has been spiraling downward for a while with few prospects of improvement. And Pakistan now faces both the consequences of long-standing weakness of democratic governance, present crisis of political authority, economic instability, and violent threats of internal security. A lot of it is due to the backlash of the situation in Afghanistan. Afghanistan's dilemma is that it has a weak government. The Afghan army suffers from a lack of legitimacy. The courts are slow. The bureaucracy is extremely corrupt. The writ of the government, sometimes it was said that Mr. Karzai was the mayor of Kabul, and then somebody added, yes, only during daytime, because after that he has to go in and under heavy protection. The international community's inability to provide the requisite financial assistance as promised in the Bonn conference is very important. There is a failure to improve the socio-economic condition of the common people and slow pace of reconstruction efforts. And there is non-proportionate representation of various ethnic groups in the present political dispensation. So, there is also a convergence of interests of terrorists, drug barons, and warlords. And that really leads to the extreme instability in Afghanistan, which, as I said, is affecting all regions and especially Pakistan. Pakistan's Afghanistan policy, basically our policy is that we have been stressing to the international community on two important issues, which is reconstruction and reconciliation at the same time. That you must start to improve the socio-economic conditions of the people of Afghanistan, and if you like, we can go into more detailed discussion on that, and reconciliation. Reconciliation because you have marginalized the most important and the major ethnic group, which is the Pashtuns, by not giving them the proper representation in Kabul, in the government of Kabul, and you need to have reconciliation amongst all people. In fact, now, as you know, the US is also considering talking to the Taliban. Pakistan, in the recent London conference, was quite successful in putting across its point of view. The international community has gone into a rethink on its Afghan policy and has come up with a reintegration strategy, and Pakistan has offered to help, including offered to help to talk to the Taliban and offering to help with whatever they have decided in London regarding the reconstruction and reintegration or reconciliation agreement. So that basically is Pakistan's policy. It is completely in Pakistan's strategic security and economic interest to have stability in Afghanistan. Our problems, in fact, began when the Soviet forces came into Afghanistan and a proxy war was fought by the United States for 10 years from 1979 to 1989 with the withdrawal of the Soviet troops after the Geneva Accords. We have hosted a large number of Afghan refugees in Pakistan. At present, there are 3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. And we would like to send them back, but there are a lot of reasons, mainly compassionate and exigency of, if you push them too far, they are likely to come back in again because of the lack of economic opportunity and not being able to sustain themselves in Afghanistan. Of course, the drug culture I have just mentioned is very detrimental. Before the Soviets came into Afghanistan, Pakistan did not have a single heroin addict. The last figures I heard were 3 million, right? They could have risen or maybe gone down a little, but that was about the average figure that used to be quoted. Now, the last thing, the other important element I've already mentioned, India and Afghanistan, and I'm deliberately just giving you the outer aspects of it, and if you want, we can go into a detailed question and answer session, is Iran's nuclear predicament. Because Iran's current program is detrimental to regional stability, and apart from the Gulf, Pakistan will be most affected if there is any foreign military adventure or use of force, which would have serious implications for Pakistan's security, economic and domestic environment, thereby creating overall instability in the region. Pakistan recognizes Iran's right to acquire nuclear energy for peaceful purposes under the IAEA safeguard. So that is our position on Iran. But what we are really concerned about is that if there is foreign intervention, it will have a serious effect on the stability and security of our borders along Iran. We may get refugees from there, and we may have to face the backlash, not because of any other reason, but because of the neighborhood and the instability in Iran, as we did with Afghanistan. And then, of course, we have Central Asia, and I would also like to mention that the developments in the outer sphere of the region also impact on regional security. And you have competing strategic interests. For example, Iran and Pakistan has competing strategic interests in Central Asia to get to the energy resources. The entire world wants to get to the energy resources of Central Asia, which are tremendous, especially in the Caspian Sea. But we have a project of the Trans-Afghan pipeline. Iran is very keen that the landlocked Central Asia reaches the warm waters through Iran, and but our advantage is that we are along the Arabian Sea, and their major ports are Bandar Abbas, but they are building another port which is called Chabahar, helped and aided by India. So there are competing strategic interests there. There are also complementary interests, which is that Russia and Iran both are interested in the Central Asian energy resources and are not interested in letting the West get to them. And so that is a complementary interest that the two of them have. China, of course, has become part of this. And the SCO forms a very, very important organization which helps to try and preserve the peace and stability and the fallout that Afghanistan has on Central Asian states. And of course, both India and Iran are interested in keeping out the Pashtun government in Afghanistan, because India would like to have influence in Kabul. And the Northern Alliance, which is now there is obviously much more to India's liking because of their close relations, rather than the Pashtun government, which would be more favorable. And Iran, of course, doesn't want that because of the Sunni Shia factor, as they were extremely anti-Taliban. Now we have the interests of the major players in South Asia or in the rest of our region. China, as you know, is an emerging and preeminent power in the global politics and economy. And China is also establishing very close ties with the regional countries. It is developing corridors of energy and trade transit. It is one of the most time-tested and close friends of Pakistan. And relations between Beijing and New Delhi have been characterized by booming bilateral trade. However, the relationship continues to be fraught with mutual suspicion on the issue of Tibet and Arunachal Pradesh. So that is an issue between China and India. But China otherwise is following a very, very wise policy. Russian interests in South Asia stand in the context of the official doctrine of the multipolar world, and the top priority is, according to India, which has been Moscow's close ally, although it is watching with great sensitivity the increasing US activity in Afghanistan and Central Asia. And that is how the SCO has, although it does not say so, the SCO is gearing up to prevent further influence of the US in Central Asia or this part of the world. Iran and China have common perceptions of security and economic cooperation, particularly in the face of US attempts to establish its presence in the region. Pakistan's relations with the Russian Federation are gradually improving, although Russians remain cognizant of Indian sensitivities and opposition on the subject. But we have had lessening of tension, and we do both of us carry the baggage of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when Pakistan was so clearly on the side of the forces that ousted the Soviets and led to the breakup of the Soviet Union. The United States in the region is now a central focus of the US policy. As you know, Afghanistan. In fact, the State Department has combined Central and South Asia as one bureau, which just shows how we are now looking at the whole region. And it has, as you know, that in Afghanistan it has a lot of stake at the moment because they have the forces, and the Obama administration has come up with a specific policy on Afghanistan, with initial surge and then a winding down. And of course is realizing that this long-standing conflict is nowhere coming to an end and will not come to an end just through military means. As far as the rest of Central Asia and the region goes, it is forging, the US is forging very close ties with India, and the US is very interested in the resources of energy resources of Central Asia, and they have tried various projects in which they can bypass Russia to get to those energy resources. From Azerbaijan, the BTC, which is the Baku Tbilisi Kehan. Baku is Azerbaijan, Tbilisi Georgia, and Kehan is Turkish. That line is something that the Americans would like to further promote, and the Europeans also for that matter, and to run, apart from oil, also the gas through that. Now you have the SCO, which is really a very, very important organization. The SCO came into, had its big origins after the breakup of the Soviet Union in what you call the Shanghai Five, where China, Russia, and the three states which bordered them, which is Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, they formed this organization. And what China did was very wise. They sat down with these countries, and there was a long-standing boundary dispute, or there were now many disputes because the countries had been divided up. And they resolved those boundary disputes, sometimes even to the detriment of China, and thus gaining the trust of the Central Asian countries. And then they came into much more demilitarization of that zone, and then they formed the SCO, which incidentally does not, is basically related to security-related issues. That means they help the Central Asian countries to control their borders and what they call the three evils of separatism, extremism, and terrorism. And they have been very helpful because Tajikistan fell into civil war, and Uzbekistan had huge issues with these groups such as the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and the Hizbut-Tahrir. So they have helped these countries to stabilize. And China has, of course, its own stakes because Xinjiang is a Muslim province which remains a little unstable, and China did not want further proliferation of these groups into the Xinjiang province. So SCO has now, of course, a much, much wider range because they are also talking about energy security, energy cooperation. They are giving out loans for commercial and trade activities amongst member states. And they also have demanded a timeline for the withdrawal of US-led coalition forces from military bases in Central Asia. And it's clear that the organization was ready to shoulder the security concerns of not only the SCO member states, but also of other countries in the region. It is therefore not surprising that SCO is now signaling a widening of the organization beyond Central Asia, although their charter just calls for those contiguous states Now, having said all this, I would just like to go in for Pakistan's challenges on the external front. Now, the maintaining balance in our relationship with the US and the West and broad basing of foreign policy is one of the challenges. Others are promoting a positive image of Pakistan in the international community, dealing with complications in the security environment due to presence of the external regional forces, and dealing with the fallout of the drone attacks in our frontier regions, which is the FATA region, allay international concerns on the safety of nuclear assets, deal with international concerns regarding presence of Al-Qaeda and Taliban in the border regions, attracting FDI and protecting export markets in the wake of global financial crisis and recession, bracing for the impact of globalization on trade, economy and culture, and dealing with effects of global warming and environmental degradation. So I've just given you the whole broad range of all the issues that we feel are challenges for us. We are facing challenges on the internal front regarding fighting of extremism, terrorism, and for the promotion of a tolerant society, political stability and development of strong democratic institutions, building consensus on national issues, promoting good governance and improving the socio-economic indicators, and achieving water and energy and food security. Water is becoming all the more important because we are having major water issues with India, because all our rivers flow from Indian occupied Kashmir and India is building dams on them. This is going to emerge as one of the major issues between India and Pakistan, and of course managing the population growth. The opportunities that we see from all this is that Pakistan's position as a frontline state or a non-NATO ally, and opportunities for cooperation with the international community in economic and military fields, strategic location at the crossroads of the three regions, which will provide us an opportunity to act as a regional trade and energy hub, engagement with the international community for resolution of the Kashmir issue, due to its perceived linkage with wider issues of peace and security in the region, and cooperation with the US to develop areas such as the FATA area, which is the bordering area between Afghanistan and Pakistan, one of the least developed areas, that would help to bring stability in that area, and leverage convergence of interests amongst Pakistan, US, EU, and major regional players to bring stability to Afghanistan, and using this leverage to the economic advantage of Pakistan to stabilize our economy. And the following opportunities can be exploited from our internal environment, which is integrate lesser developed backward areas and bring them into the national mainstream, curb extremist tendencies and crack down on sectarian and extremist organizations, improve communications and infrastructure, including ports, to develop Pakistan as a regional hub, build on the increasing inversion in the masses against extremism and to achieve national consensus, taking advantage of the recent political and judicial developments, strengthen state institutions, and I must give credit to the present government. They have done a lot in this regard, carrying forward the structural reforms to stabilize the economy and achieve sustained growth. So basically, those are the advantages that we see. Now, I just want to come to the future projection of the regional security situation. As existing revolving trends, new trends which are taking root is based on global drivers and regional dynamics, have direct implications for region security, which are as follows: that the unipolarity of the global order, with the US retaining preeminence as the sole superpower, has the following implications. There is reduced strategic space for countries like Pakistan and compulsion to manage their security interests within a cooperative framework with the US while remaining relevant to other key international players as well. Lesser likelihood of interstate military conflicts outside the US agenda. Should such conflicts erupt outside US agenda, they are likely to remain limited. Overriding influence of geoeconomics on strategic formulation and increased globalization will have two main effects. Energy security and trade interests of the region and extra-regional powers now constitute more pronounced dimensions of security in calculus and stability, and expanding information technologies wherein psychological weapons will generate major threats and may even achieve the aims without recourse to conflict or with minimum application of military instrument. You have very damaging to us the prevailing Western perceptions of Islamic militancy or extremism. Then there is the overt nuclearization of South Asia for deterrence as well as coercive application, which has added a new dimension to both perceived threats and to the strategic stability of the region. internal dynamics of regional states. I told you which is a very dysfunctional region, and that is going to continue to impact us. Instability in Afghanistan has spilled over to destabilize Pakistan, and we have already spoken about it. And the Iran-US nuclear crisis has the potential of creating instability in the region with global ramifications. So basically, this along with, I've already spoken of the climate change, food security, water security, disparity in wealth, which will be affecting our region in the future. So far as the nuclear dimension in South Asia is concerned, the notion of strategic deterrence has worked equally efficiently in the India-Pakistan security calculus as it did during the Cold War era for the US and Soviet Union. The equilibrium thus created is likely to continue for foreseeable future, providing relative stability and security environment to both the countries to pursue their development goals with greater freedom. And the conclusion is that the key to understanding the region's prospects of instability and violence, apart from the long-standing disputes, is poverty and uneven economic development. We are repeatedly reminded that internal security and political stability cannot be understood without the reference to economic and social inequalities and developmental trends. And that really applies a lot to Afghanistan also. And that really is the key to it. And policymakers should attend to these in those terms rather than focusing on the ideological rhetoric. And that's the difference. That I think is what the US would need to understand, and the Obama administration would need to really understand, is that there are no military solutions. And as a conclusion, I would like to say that the world order as it emerged after the World War II saw regionalism as the cornerstone of interstate relations. It played a predominant role in ensuring peace and stability, and gave rich dividends of economic progress and prosperity. And the two most excellent regional organizations that I can mention here are the EU and ASEAN. Regionalism, in my opinion, still remains the most effective instrument to ensure security and stability in the nation's state. So far, our region remains dysfunctional, where the key to peace and stability lies in greater regional cohesion. For Pakistan, this remains the major challenge as well as presents the best opportunity. And I'd like to just end there and go in for the question and answer session.
Can you elaborate on the heroin addicts and how it affects their day-to-day life and contributes to the cycle of poverty?
Well, heroin addiction is much greater than what opium would be, or some of the lesser drugs. Once addicted, it can degenerate the human body really very, very fast. And then what happens consequently is that once you get hooked onto it, you get so desperate that you are willing to commit any crime, you are willing to sell out your whole household. I know in Central Asia there were men who sold the entire house while the children were in school and the wife was out, and they came back without being a home. And then obviously it leaves homeless people, it leaves desperate people, and it leads to crime, and drug trafficking is a major issue, because the drug traffickers first establish addiction to help with the trafficking. So it really is a spiraling problem. It then goes on to much larger dimensions of the amount of money that is available to the drug traffickers, the money laundering, the paying to government officials to distort government machineries, plus purchase of weapons, weaponization of states, plus criminal activities being increased, plus of course weapons, human trafficking, and funding of terrorists. So it really sort of has a domino effect.
Again, thank you on behalf of CASAR for coming. We had a marvelous lunch, and it's wonderful to continue the conversation. We're very grateful for your coming to AD. I had two questions. One is directly related to Lebanon and the Lebanese situation, and the analogy, which is the trauma of the assassination of Minister Bhutto and the destabilization that's sort of taken place by all of the incidents subsequent, not that they're necessarily related, but it's an environment that many Lebanese and those of us who've lived here will recognize. And the other, I suppose, is somewhat related to the question you just had about heroin addiction. I remember seeing the lawyers who were stalwarts. The idea of lawyers usually get a bad reputation in, at least where I'm from, the United States, but they were out on the streets and demanding the rule of law. Could you talk a little bit about the rule of law in this period of destabilization, of drugs and other difficulties that you mentioned? So those two questions. The rule of law in this analogy, I know Benazir Bhutto was not elected, but she was this major figure there in the same way that Rafiq al-Hariri was. And Lebanon, of course, has antagonisms with its neighbors that are somewhat analogous to those between, say, Pakistan and India.
Yes, you're absolutely right. She was somewhat of an icon. And yes, her death actually, in fact her assassination, extremely unfortunate, resulted in almost a very immediate sense of destabilization. It was very immediate that there was a violent eruption which had become extremely difficult for the government of the day to control. But what did happen was that it was controlled. I mean, it did calm down when the government promised immediate elections. So although the main figure was gone, the Pakistan People's Party is, I think, the largest and the represented party in Pakistan. They managed to get most of the majority of the votes, although the sympathy factor was added to it because of the death of really the icon and the major leader of the Pakistan People's Party. I don't think there was anybody in Pakistan who did not feel really the impact of the assassination. It's really very unfortunate because we don't get national leaders of that stature very often. But to give credit to the Pakistan People's Party, they were able to rally around, and they did come out in the election. The elections were recognized by the international community to be free and fair, and they were elected into power, and they are in power at the moment. And although they are now facing much tougher opposition, and they are now also facing something that previous democratically elected governments did not face. In fact, no other government faced, and that is something which I find very good, and I would like to mention it here, is that Pakistan has come a long way as far as the development of its civil society goes. It is something that even we Pakistanis are really, very surprised and very pleasantly surprised about, that the civil society has really progressed, and civil society has come out as a major instrument of public opinion. Now, first of all, the cohesion, national cohesion, if anybody had any doubts about it, they were removed when the earthquake took place in 2005 and it destroyed a lot of our northern areas. The response from Karachi to Balochistan to Sindh to even the FATA was amazing, amazing response. And the UN in its report has said that amongst all the disasters, Katrina, tsunami and the Pakistani earthquake, that was the best response of the civil society and the best response of the government. Internationally recognized as that. So civil society, that is one of it. The other thing that has happened is that the media has become free, and in my opinion, and I have been around the world, I feel one of the freest, in fact probably the freest media in the world is Pakistani media. It oversteps its limits at times because they are still learning what responsible behavior is. But it is now forging public opinion, and as a result of that, it keeps the government on its toes. And when I say free media, I always had a problem that I would sometimes, when I was in Los Angeles, I tell my American friends that you don't have a free media. They say, come on, if America doesn't do that. I said, well, I'll tell you why. Because you cannot see BBC International or CNN International in the US. All right? Very few people subscribe to national newspapers. Santa Monica reads its own newspaper, Westwood reads its own newspaper, Beverly Hills reads, they want to know what's going on in Beverly Hills and they want to know what's going on in Santa Monica. They don't buy the Los Angeles Times, very few people do. I just checked around and very few people said yes we do, because there isn't that. You cannot, and then you know, Al Jazeera for example, is not being given a license in the United States. And people say, you know, the American population is not really interested, give them a choice. So in Pakistan, the media has become over. Sometimes people complain, the politicians complain very bitterly in fact, but it has become so strong that for the first time, it was the civil society which was, and the third pillar which I am talking about is the judiciary. That the judiciary has become independent for the first time in our history of our nation, and they are now completely independent of the executive and other branches and taking their own decisions. And who got them? This independence, the civil society did. Those lawyers on the streets were out for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who was dismissed by President Musharraf. And by the time everything was through, President Musharraf was no longer the president, and Mr. Iftikhar Chaudhry was again the Chief Justice of Pakistan. So, and now, you know, if the Supreme Court rules on anything and the government does not abide by it, the civil society wants the government, and so does the media. And the government has had to back down on a lot of its decisions because of the rival. But the government also appreciates and does nothing to curb either the freedom of the media and of course not the freedom of the judiciary. This is something which is very positive, which has come up in Pakistan. I think that would kind of cover it.
Yes, there's a need for a microphone here.
Thanks. I just want to ask the ambassador on the dramatic increase of drug production in Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban, and how that correlates with the question of terrorism. If she can describe that a bit more in detail. Thank you.
I think that was the question Safiya's asked. You asked, and I kind of interconnected it with the. You see how it correlates is that if you have such large drug production, what has happened is, incidentally, the latest UNDP report says that the production has gone down, but the heroin produced is more because the farmers are able to get out much more from each of the poppy flowers, okay, from the bulbs of the poppy. What happens is that when you have such a large production, you have the demand is extensive around the world, and it is an expensive demand. I mean, it's a very lucrative demand. So the drug traffickers make a lot of money. Now there are criminal groups who use that money because they are part of the drug trafficking. The drug traffickers are not law-abiding citizens; they are criminals. So they indulge in other criminal activities also. They are also even the Taliban are using drug money for buying their own weapons to fight in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda is using the drug money to fight, although Al-Qaeda is also being funded by outside forces, which is why what you call the hundi system, which is this transfer of non-banking finances across the world, is money laundering is being cracked down upon by the US. These form a nexus with the human trafficking. And from Central Asia, you had massive human trafficking, mafias who traffic women and children. So the outcome of that drug thing is extremely damaging. And I think you are all aware of the clear distinction between Taliban and Al-Qaeda. If not, I will give it to you again. Anybody unclear about it? You are?
No, I just want to volunteer to.
Yeah, please go.
The Arabic-speaking terrorists and the Taliban, they're more the local people.
All right, I'll tell yes. Background. When the Soviet Union came into Afghanistan, the United States could not go and attack or fight a direct war with the Soviet Union. And neither did Pakistan, because the Soviet Union had reached its borders and we could not risk that, otherwise the Soviet forces would have come into Pakistan. So a proxy war was thought about. But when you start the proxy war, you don't have enough, they didn't have enough manpower. So they started recruiting the disgruntled and the unemployed from the entire Arab world. And they flew them in by thousands and thousands and thousands. This was a CIA-led operation. And they trained them on the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan and sent them into fight. All right? Armed them heavily, heavy contingents of arms, including the Stinger missile. They said the one war was won by the Stinger missile because the Soviet air power was so strong that the Mujahideen fighting the war, Mujahideen are these glorious warriors who later are called terrorists, fighting against the Soviet Union, were losing the war when the Soviets brought in their air force, had brought in, and the Americans introduced the Stinger, and Stinger destroyed Soviet air power. Stinger, and the Stingers were there in thousands, so very heavily armed. All right. When the Soviet forces withdrew, the United States people packed up their suitcases, got onto flights, and went back to America. We told them you're leaving behind a very, very dangerous situation, an unstable Afghanistan, and of course we did not realize the potential of these groups. But gradually, what was found is that they, having fought that war, being ideologically so motivated to fight a jihad, they were told that you must fight a jihad regardless of your nationality, because in Islam you don't have to be a Tunisian or a Libyan to fight in Libya or Tunisia. You have to be a Muslim and you can fight in Afghanistan, because you have to fight a war to save Islam from the infidels. So they were very ideologically motivated, and they were heavily armed. And then the first Gulf War took place, and a lot of Muslim population died during the first Gulf War. That changed Osama bin Laden's orientation, and of course American troops in Saudi Arabia. They changed the orientation, and the guns were turned now to the US. But these groups existed. They sometimes were located in Sudan, briefly Somalia, but basically now in Afghanistan once the Taliban came in. Now who are the Taliban? Taliban, as you know, it's an Arab word, just means student, right? They were students studying in seminaries along the border towns of Pakistan. They were all Afghans, and when there was such mayhem in Afghanistan, they went in and started confronting those local commanders. They were very successful, and they were able to de-weaponize all the people and bring about a law and order which everybody appreciated, so they really liked them. Initially the Taliban were welcomed by the Afghan population, and they were so successful, they went all the way up to Kabul. Only the northern alliance, which is up near the Central Asian states, you have the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and the Turkmen Afghans, but you know, of that origin, which are the northern alliance people, they were the only ones who were not under Taliban control. And they had brought law and order, they had de-weaponized, and they had cut down on the heroin production. They were ruling their own country. Of course, their rule is one of the worst examples of tyranny that we can think of, especially where the status of women was concerned, but these are the Taliban. Now, the Taliban were hosting Al-Qaeda, which was destabilizing not only the other Arab countries that they belonged to, they were under threat also, but basically the United States, because they felt the United States now was an enemy of the Muslim world after the Gulf War and stationing of American troops in Muslim countries. Now 9/11 happens, and the Americans told the Taliban, who were rulers in their own country, that hand over these groups of Arabs to us. And the Taliban said, we will not, because it is, first of all, there was affinity of ideological affinity, but also because you have the Pashtun code, which is called the Pashtun code, which is called Pakhtunkhwa. And they stick it's a tribal code which says that you will die before you give over your guest to anyone. And they said, we will not do that. And the United States asked Pakistan, and we sent in a couple of delegations trying to convince the Taliban to hand over these people because they had committed a crime in the United States, and they refused. When they refused is when the US sent in its military, and they bombed the Taliban out of Kabul. The Taliban were on the run. But the Taliban, let me be very clear here, are fighting a war in their own country to get rid of foreign troops who they feel have occupied their country. Alright? Al-Qaeda is that group of Arab warriors or fighters who now have a grudge against basically the United States, a grudge against Israel, and of course a grudge against the rulers of their own countries. And they have an international agenda. The Taliban don't have an international agenda. They are simply wanting to get rid of people who they feel are who have invaded their own country. There's a very clear distinction we need to draw here.
Thank you. I have one question which sort of follows up on the last one. I think it's a foregone conclusion that the U.S. is going to be absent from Afghanistan in the not too distant future, and that there will be, of course, a struggle over power there. What are going to be the implications of that for Lebanon? How is this going to affect the region if the Taliban comes back into power in Afghanistan and allows, agrees to protect organizations like Al-Qaeda again?
Actually, I think you may be presuming a lot that might happen. I personally feel it really wouldn't go that. It would not, the US would not leave Afghanistan completely, because this whole issue of securing the homeland and securing the lives of the American people would go away, and it's not going to go away. They will not leave it in that position where they will just simply withdraw and not leave back a force enough to restrain the Taliban and continue whatever measures they can take against Al-Qaeda. So that I don't think will go away in the near future, and I don't foresee an immediate return of the Taliban regime, followed by upsurge of Al-Qaeda, and basically what the US really needs to do is to remove the root causes of this conflict. If they cannot see the kind of sufferings of the Palestinian people and they don't want to do anything about that, then they cannot in any way resolve this issue. If they do not see that the Afghan people do not want an occupying force, but they want help for reconstruction and reconciliation in their country, then you have to remove the root causes which result in this. And Al-Qaeda's basic point of Osama bin Laden is that he does not want American troops on Saudi soil, that he didn't want, he wants a resolution of the Palestinian issue. Those are the kind of things that Al-Qaeda calls for. So, if you want the sympathy for these people, or the recruitment that they are able to do, if you want that to go away, the root cause. But as far as your specific question goes, I don't really feel it would fall into that order. I think there's a gentleman there who's been raising his hand.
Yeah, we need the microphone.
My question is about the issue of the nuclear Iran and what the Pakistani position of what's happening right now, and what is position of a nuclear powered Iran. And the other, on that same issue, what is Pakistan doing with the neighbors of Iran, like in particular Turkey and Saudi Arabia? Are you drawing up strategies of how to deal with this issue right now, or as how you might be
deal with which
the Iranian nuclear Iran issue, and how you might deal with it in the future in case Iran gets the bomb? Or I just would like to know your position.
Sure. I think I had already said it, but I will just repeat myself on this. Is that I have very clearly said that we absolutely feel that Iran has the right to develop peaceful use of nuclear energy under IAEA safeguards. We've already said that. It's a member of the NPT. Incidentally, it was Ayatollah Khomeini's sort of ideology or part of his thing that nuclear weapons were haram. They don't condone nuclear weapons. That keep in mind. But as far as Pakistan worrying about Iran becoming a nuclear power which would affect our security. In the first instance, we are worried about how others will react. For example, Israel or the United States will react. And if they destabilize Iran by attacking it, then what will be the consequences for Pakistan, because we are a neighbor? As you know, when Iraq, although I don't think the United States will do that because we had enough in Iraq, but when Iraq did come under military attack from the United States, as you know, all neighbors, the neighborhood eventually suffers. So that is our first concern. Of course, our second concern is that I don't foresee a belligerent nuclear Iran threatening Pakistan's security. We do not have, we've had basically very good historical, very close relations with Iran. And the people of Pakistan and the people of Iran are very, very well, they have very, very good relationship. They have a very good feeling of friendship amongst them. There have been great differences at times between Pakistan's policies and Iran's policies, especially after the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. So we've had differences after the revolution. The Iranians used to also feel that we were very close to the Shah also, but we have overcome that. And at present, you know, President Zardari has made it a point to improve relations with Iran. He has visited Iran. As you know, we have a lot of trilateral and quadrilateral mechanisms to try and resolve Afghanistan. One of the mechanisms is Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we meet at the head of state level to resolve. The other is, I think Tajikistan comes in also. The third is Afghanistan, Russia and Pakistan. There is Afghanistan, Turkey and Pakistan. So we have all these mechanisms that are working, and we are meeting the Iranians. And they had some concerns, as you know, recently regarding Jindallah, and Pakistan was very forthcoming, and we managed to remove their concerns. So our basic concern really is not what you thought. Maybe we are in touch with Saudi Arabia or Turkey to see what will be the fallout. That's not how we do it.
There's a question.
You spoke about the strengthening of civil society. I was wondering if you can maybe tell me a little bit about the factors that led to this process or this reform.
All right. Well, to be honest, you know, I'll give you a very personal opinion. I was very happily surprised by, you know, over a period of time, a new generation has come up in Pakistan, and very well aware of their rights. And it has, in fact, even the government of President Musharraf, when first the lawyers came out on the streets, they were very surprised and they thought this is going to be it, one demonstration. But what he didn't realize is that the entire nation and the media, it was basically the media who made the lawyers' movement a great success. And they you know, gradually it has developed because this generation has come up, and as institutions they have developed, and they have helped to make the judiciary independent. Now, who gave the media the independence? It is President Musharraf, who eventually became a victim of it himself. You know, he himself was ousted because of the great media pressure that was on him. So it's something that he gave complete freedom to the media. And during his tenure, the media heavily criticized him also, and he took it. You know, he allowed it to. Towards the end, when things became very critical, when he did try to block the media, the reactions in Pakistan were tremendous, and he just couldn't take that pressure. He had to just eventually back down and eventually leave. So, having let the genie out of the bottle, it has brought about gelling of public opinion, and that public opinion is so good that it's so good for democracy that it keeps the government on its toes, and the People's Party government listens to the civil society and has modulated its policies and its positions to accommodate that. So that's what democracy is all about.
you were discussing Afghanistan and saying that stability there was probably the most important for really furthering the goals of Pakistan and the United States, and Afghanistan for that matter. But I was wondering, seeing as you were being somewhat critical of Obama's surge strategy and then perhaps backing off, I agree, but what would you say to accusations that Pakistan is not necessarily committed to battles against Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, considering they're seeing a farther future and knowing that they need to be right next door? And on that note, if the government is committed to that, do you think that the army is on the same page?
Again, I think you're mixing Al-Qaeda with Taliban. I've drawn the clear distinction. There is no question of Pakistan in any way supporting or not doing anything with Al-Qaeda, because we are the greatest victims of this terrorism, which is being perpetuated not only by the Taliban. We have a chapter of Pakistani Taliban also, and all these suicide bombings that are taking place in Pakistan with huge losses of life, civilian life and military life. Our military personnel have also laid down their over 3,000 almost military personnel who have laid down their lives so far or been injured. Having said that, I don't think, I know impression is created that Pakistan is not doing enough. It is doing more than enough. It has now, in fact, evolved under the present government. For the first time, it has evolved into a consensus between the military, the civil society, and the government. And the parliament, of course. Everybody now is completely on the same page. This was not the case a couple of years ago. And it was certainly not the case in the early 2000s. The reason was that there was such a backlash of public opinion on American military action in Afghanistan and the collateral damage that was caused there. Because you have one brother living on the Afghan border and the other brother living here, and his son gets married to his daughter, and they just cross over the border. For them to have to witness so much disaster and so many deaths of people, and just the sheer invasion of the US, that had caused a backlash in Pakistan. And in the government of the NWFE, which is our northernmost province, you had the religious parties winning a large amount of votes, which has never been the case in Pakistan. You have a large number of religious parties, but they don't win the votes. In the parliament, they are hardly represented. It is parties like the Pakistan People's Party or the PML, the Pakistan Muslim League, which wins the votes of the people. So at that time, that happened, the backlash. And yes, there was sympathy because there was felt that Taliban in Afghanistan were fighting for their own homeland to rid themselves of people who had invaded. But now, as things have evolved, we are staunchly, all of us, on the same page. The military is going under the direction of the political government and has achieved very good success in the region of SAARC and is now stationed in our border areas.
I have a question about internal groupings or internal players, be they them tribes or political groups. How do they interact? Because I think we, being very far from Pakistan, we the least that we know about Pakistan about its internal issues, and if there is these groupings and each one of them may even ally themselves with outside the country forces, like maybe the case as it is in Lebanon or similar to that. Will that lead to Pakistan being a regional place where the regional issues are solved? Is it the case now, or for example, Saudi Arabia trying to send a message to Iran, or the opposite, or the Western interests are at stake? And is this affecting Pakistan's ability to be a regional player in Central Asia?
No, I don't find any similarities to what you would find in Lebanon. Yes, when the Iranian Revolution took place, as is the case with all revolutions, that in all revolutions the ideology is exported. It happened with the French Revolution, it happened with the Russian Revolution. And it happened with the Iranian. They did try to export it into the Arab countries, they did try to export it into Pakistan. And of course, there was great concern by Saudi Arabia, because obviously Saudi Arabia is so staunchly Sunni and would not want to see an increasing influence of Iran. But we have handled it in our own manner, and there are no linkages as such. There's no such thing as linkages of people in Pakistan with Iran. That doesn't exist. It is very much a cohesive society. That's not right. Yes, of course, like I said, both countries tried to to promote their ideological interests, and it did affect our sectarianism. But our sectarianism doesn't translate into any kind of political manifestation. It is purely sectarian.
What about the tribes? How are they linked to the policy-making dynamics in that country?
Which tribes?
Pakistan, those who already exist and for a long time were there even before the establishment of the state, the modern state.
Pakistan का matter. Tribes only exist in this area. Let me tell you. Okay, this is Afghanistan. You have the tribal belt here. Exactly where I'm drawing the line to you is a thin, small belt around here. This is called the tribal belt. Alright? This is where the tribals live. It is 170 million people who live in Pakistan. Urbanized, many urban centers, schools, medical colleges, engineering colleges, technical colleges. We are a nuclear power. We develop that nuclear power from our own resources. And these tribal people, initially what the British had done is that they had allowed them to follow their own code of conduct. They did not, it was much larger, the region, during the British times, but gradually it shrunk to these few bordering areas. The British let them have their own, you had the frontier crime regulator, FCR law, which functioned for them. It was different from the normal courts, all right? But, and they were allowed to work out their own sort of law and order situation. We had political agents from the center, from the capitals being posted there, bureaucrats who are called political agents, who would interact with the tribal leaders. This whole equation has changed. First of all, a lot of them have become integrated into the normal urban life, and it has also changed because no longer are the maliks. The maliks were the tribal ruler, elders, or the heads. From them, the leadership changed to the mullahs, and from the mullah, it has changed to the youth. So you have these Pakistani Taliban who are called Baitullah Masood and Naeemullah Masood, both of them, that they have died now, but you have these people there who are now taking over the leadership of this region and changing the dynamic. But this is where the tribes are, and they are fiercely independent people. And they are not necessarily all pro-Taliban either. In fact, all of them are not pro-Taliban. Some of them have given refuge, but they are quite fed up now of all the activities in their that's where the tribes are. Otherwise, I don't know where else the tribes are.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
May I go back to the nuclear issues? This time, asking you to elaborate a bit on the Pakistani nuclear strategy. Besides, I would also like to know whether there are some kind of dialogue between Pakistani and Indian authorities on nuclear issues, and also whether there has been any reaction from the Pakistani authorities to these recent moves, President Obama stressing his commitment to try to achieve at one point concrete steps to reach nuclear disarmament. So we have been witnessing moves or speeches, at least, in that direction. Has there been any reaction of Pakistani authorities saying, well, under particular conditions, we would also, be part of a global move to try to achieve nuclear disarmament? And I have also a small question concerning the influence of the military in Pakistan. I read or I have heard during the conference, I don't remember exactly, at some point that around 50% of the population in Pakistan were directly or indirectly depending upon military, saying that a member of the family owner would be employed by the military, that somehow half of the Pakistani population would be very directly or indirectly linked to the military. So whether you can confirm that or
all right, I'll answer the second one. I don't think it is. We have a 500,000 strong military force, very professional, very well organized, and internationally recognized as very professional and good soldiers. We have been one of the major peacekeeping forces in the world. I think we are not in Lebanon because of all the political connotations that Pakistan's presence would imply. But in almost the rest of the world, Pakistan has had probably one of the largest contingents. And we have always been acknowledged by the UN to be one of the best that they employ abroad. So given the professionalism of the Pakistan. In fact, in Somalia, I don't know how many of you saw that movie Black Hawk Down. But when the US military personnel were trapped in Somalia, Pakistani contingent was there and we saved their lives. And President Clinton wrote to say that it was exemplary how professional your army is. So that's it. But by no standards are 170 million employed by 500,000 military strong in Pakistan. I don't know where and how these figures will come about. I don't know about it, and I don't think they're factually correct. All right. As far as the nuclear goes, let me just tell you that Pakistan's nuclear program is purely defensive. And there is no doubt in anybody's mind that it is not. We have never shown any overt desire or tried to express our nuclear ability or our nuclear power to in an overt manner. Our policy is of maintaining credible minimum deterrence for maintaining strategic stability in South Asia. And I think we have managed to do that. We do have a credible minimum deterrence, and it has helped to maintain the strategic stability. There have been times when the two armies have been eyeball to eyeball at the borders, but they have drawn back because Pakistan had said that we will not let our national security be endangered by a conventional strike by India. So it has maintained that balance, which it has done. Now, having said that, we went nuclear, as I said, only because India went nuclear. And we have been both acknowledged by the world for being, when you count the 5 nuclear powers, of course Israel is never mentioned in any book or any list, but 5 and Pakistan and India, and of course Israel. being the other part. We have made throughout the years, even prior to the time when the nuclear detonation of our nuclear device, that was in May 1998, even prior to that, we had gone to India with a number of non-proliferation proposals, and India did not accept any of them. And now we have gone in for a proposal which is called the Strategic Restraint Regime in South Asia. Unfortunately, India is not accepting that. It is going ahead with its missile production, with providing nuclear warheads for those missiles. It's going ahead with its program. And if that threatens our national security, then we have the right to defend ourselves. So basically, that is our policy on the nuclear proliferation. And we do explain that to the Americans. So there is no likelihood that Pakistan will ever give up its nuclear program or its right to exist as a free, independent nation. That everybody is very clear about. With a strong media and civil society, the likelihood has even shrunk further. You know, when Mr. Bhutto, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto started our nuclear program, after India's first nuclear explosion, Henry Kissinger flew down from Washington and said that we are going to make a horrible example of you. And Mr. Bhutto's response was that my people are prepared to eat grass, but we'll go ahead with this nuclear program because it is vital for our national security. It's still the case.
You said water scarcity was going to be a major problem in the future, so what's the plan? Is it going to be desalination? And then my other question is about how is Pakistan supporting and promoting women's rights?
Two of my favorite questions. Water and women. Not necessarily in that order. Anyway, water is going to be a major problem. As you know that we have, can you give me some other map in which I can be able to indicate? Pakistan, as you know, the major river is the Indus River with 5 tributaries. And when we became independent, India tried to block Pakistan's water because it flows from Indian-occupied Kashmir. Now, all right. So basically, from Indian-occupied Kashmir is where the water flows down. And we went to the World Bank. The World Bank sat India down on a table and worked out a formula in which we were given 3 rivers and they were given the other 2, which are the tributaries that flow into Pakistan. In fact, this is the only time that Pakistan and India have been able to reach a just solution to a problem. This is what we tell the international community. If you want India to behave, put it on the table with a third country. Of course, they don't want to do that. Because who wants to sit with other people and discuss Kashmir, which is such a obviously disadvantageous to Indians. So water was one thing they sat down and did. But unfortunately, since then, India has gradually started building dams on the upper riverian side. And then there was a stipulation in the treaty, but what they are doing is they are building these sluices which can drain the water out, and that is completely against the treaty. We have gone to the international court, we've had an arbitrator. Unfortunately, the arbitrator came up with an extremely prejudiced view about it, and we have registered our complaint about that. But water is becoming one of the major issues between Pakistan and India. The other thing is that internally also we have built a couple of dams, but we need to build a lot more dams because during the hot season a lot of water just flows into the sea. There are interprovincial problems on that because there are again the lower riparians which feel that the upper riparian provinces might divert that water and they will not get it. So these are all issues that we are dealing with, but water is one of the crucial issues in our part of the world. Yes. Women. All right. It's a mixed picture, I have to tell you, and a lot of injustice has been done. But the good news is that we have come up with some mechanisms which I think you will be very interested to hear about. That again, during President Musharraf's regime of this, there was a stipulation that 33% of representation in the parliaments, in the provincial assemblies and at the district level must be of women. Now, women can't always fight general elections, so they were nominated by their political parties and they sat there. The criticism was that, well, so-and-so's minister's daughter is sitting there, sister is sitting there, cousin is sitting there. All right, they may be, but they are all thinking women and they are making a difference. They are all there and they are all talking out. So 33% of them are sitting there. There were times when at the district level for the councillors, we said, well, you don't have women to fill the seat, and the government said, fine, the seat will remain vacant till such time that you want. So that is the kind of representation you get. You also have a large number of very good Pakistani NGOs, sometimes led by very eminent Pakistani women who are lawyers, who protect women considerably. And you know, a woman who has had problems can go to them and they fight their cases in court. They also have these places called Darul Aman, where an abused wife or children can go and stay if the husband has been very abusive. Just recently in the Punjab Assembly, Provincial Assembly, there was the women raised, they were heavily critical of a suggestion that men should be allowed to marry a second time, and they said they should only be allowed to marry once. According to the family laws of Pakistan, a man cannot marry a second time unless he gets written permission of his first wife. Of course, women sometimes are so economically vulnerable that she says, okay, the other alternative is he's going to divorce me. At least here I'm living in a home and I have my children with me and he pay for the home and the children, and they accept the situation like that. But generally speaking, that if the first wife does not, that family law of Pakistan does not give permission, the man cannot marry a second time. So that's where we are on women. Of course, women are equally represented, and there is no restriction for women to enter any service, to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, diplomats. And in fact, almost all of European capitals 1 year ago were headed by women. London, Paris, Spain, Poland, Germany, practically all of them had women ambassadors. So there is no restriction. Women themselves may not want to become diplomats because of the upheaval in the family life, but there is no restriction in even becoming. You have women who head districts, and these districts who are very, very difficult. And I was very impressed. There was this young, you call them assistant commissioners, it used to be reality system now. And she said she would go around exactly near these areas which we were talking about, the tribal areas. And I said, did they listen to you when you acted like a magistrate? Yes, of course they did. So that's the other side. Yeah, and of course there is the side where they are. There is a lot of crime that is committed against women, but the media has become very alive. Immediately picks it up, and people have to pay for it. And there was recently a case of a young girl working in somebody's house, and she died, and they felt that they had abused her so much that she had died. And the chief minister of the province has had him arrested, I think, and he's going to be tried in court and convicted, and I think everybody will think twice before doing anything like that any longer.
Well, thank you so much for